Every once in a while, a story pops up that just defies all logic, all the rules of storytelling, and let's be honest, all sanity. Today, we're going to dive headfirst into one of these masterpieces. It appeared back in 2024 from a group that called themselves the Dodo Gang. So let's just get right into it.
Okay, so every great story, it needs a great logo, right? Well, just look at this thing. It absolutely screams epic sci-fi adventure. You've got the cosmic backgrounds, something called an infinity gate, and an Indian slipper. Yeah, this is our very first clue that what we were promised and what we were about to get are two very, very different things.
So, where does this grand saga kick off? The one promised by that epic logo? Some mythical kingdom? A far-off galaxy? Nope. It starts, like all legendary tales, in a restaurant with a bunch of friends just chatting about jobs.
And our story begins with this incredibly relatable, super normal question from a character named Tommy Jane. What kind of job should I pursue? See? A simple, almost boring start. But don't get too comfortable. And just like that, any sense of normal conversation is completely shattered. We meet Bun Bun, who seems like an ambitious rabbit, and then we meet Eleaf, who immediately lets us know he's the grumpy one of the group. The dialogue just goes from 0 to 100, with Eleaf calling Bun Bun an idiot-fueled rabbit. So yeah, this is our main cast, folks.
All right, let's formally meet some of these future conquerors. And as you're about to see, the difference between how these characters look and how they actually talk and act, well, that's kind of the whole point of the story. Okay, first up, take a look at Thorfinn. The art here is incredible, right? He's surrounded by these cosmic clocks and floating cities. He looks like he could literally bend reality just by thinking about it. You'd expect him to be the wise, powerful leader of the group, wouldn't you?
Well, think again. The second Bun Bun and Eleaf tell him to shut up, this is his internal monologue. He just gives up. So what's so great about this is that it shows our epic-looking hero is actually, well, he's a terrible peacemaker who just decides that any conflict is way too much of a headache to deal with.
The story doesn't just play with what you expect from the characters. It seems to just love creating total contradictions. And there is no better example of this chaotic energy than the character, or maybe characters, known as Lemon Jane. So in the text, we get a line where Lemon Jane asks her brother for cupcakes. And then in this image, we see a female character named Lemon. Seems simple, right? Except in other pictures from the source material, there's a male character who is also named Lemon. Is it the same person? Are they siblings? Who knows? The story just does not care. And honestly, that's part of its charm. It just keeps going.
And then, coming out of absolutely nowhere, the story's big turning point arrives. After insulting a rabbit and completely ignoring a request for cupcakes, Elaf just pivots the entire conversation with this super casual, world-changing suggestion. So how does the group react to this idea of ditching their future careers to become world conquerors? With a massive collective shrug. That sounds all right. So the main takeaway here is this group is very, very easy to persuade. So with their new life goal decided, the group just leaves the restaurant to go find their powers. Let's see how this whole thing unfolds now that they've got a guide and some new rules for their world. This is Ramu, or Ramu Kaka, who shows up to be their wise mentor figure. He looks totally serene, experienced, and ready to guide our heroes on their quest with some ancient wisdom and maybe a nice, refreshing glass of lassi. And the very first piece of wisdom he shares is this official power ranking. It starts out pretty standard. You've got a color-coded system from white all the way to black. But then you get to the final top-tier level, which is just Bun Bun. Yes, the small, idiot-fueled rabbit is somehow, for no reason at all, in a power class all by himself, above everyone else. Now, if you thought a rabbit being the most powerful creature in the universe was weird, just hold on. The story now enters what I can only describe as its fever dream phase, where the plot just accelerates at a totally impossible speed. Okay, let's just try to walk through this together. This all happens during a college final exam. Thorfinn and Ramu Kaka pull Bun Bun out to send him to the moon, where he lands on Neil Armstrong's head. Then, Ramu Kaka gets kidnapped. Okay, a carrot falls from the moon, which starts a light-speed race between Bun Bun and Thorfinn, and in the crossfire, their mentor gets beaten into a coma. And just as all this chaos hits its peak, the exam bell rings. It's just a whirlwind of pure, unfiltered nonsense. So, where does all this lead? After missions to the moon and lightspeed carrot fights, the grand finale of this origin story happens in the most epic setting imaginable, a hospital room. So the group is all gathered around their mentor, who's in a coma. And then he just wakes up and says this. Apparently, all of that chaos, interrupting an exam, getting kidnapped, being beaten unconscious, that was the final test. Their powers are now unlocked. The end.
And that's where the story leaves us. It's a surreal, hilarious, and just totally baffling journey. And it definitely raises more questions than it answers. But maybe the biggest one is this. Now that this gang of misfits has their powers, and their strongest member is a rabbit who wants to be a reporter, what on earth are they actually going to conquer? And maybe more importantly, what does a story like this tell us about how wild and collaborative and sometimes just brilliant creativity can be online?